All right, best of 3. In the bottom left, as the blue Zerg, we do have Impact. In the top right, as the pink Protoss, it is Zest. I can almost guarantee that the pros do not want to choose Turbo Cruise. I can almost guarantee that usually Crank helps make the decisions about the map pool, but either way, Olivia or Crank or both. I'm thinking that they chose Turbo Cruise in the Elite League map pool, which is only 5 maps, guys. Because they wanted it to be used, otherwise it would not be. Now, I say that, but in the past, Crank, and I know it was Crank who made this call way back when, has made like 1 or 2 map decisions that I just straight up disagree with. Not because he like wants to force diversity of maps and was like, these aren't gonna be played anyways, but because he thought they were okay. I don't remember what map specifically. It was back when I was casting with BO3 TV full time. And me and Rifkin were just like, no, this wasn't the right call. Like, what is this? So weird. But it doesn't happen too often, because during the Elite League has been running for 4 years. I don't even know, 5 years. It doesn't happen too often, but Turbo Cruise is not a map that everyone is in love with. Not everyone loves the map in general, right? But also they don't like that it is something that is so special, okay? It's right. It's seriously with these inhibitor zones and the way the map is curved and whatnot. It's kind of being that kid in school who is like, lol, so random. And some people are okay with that. They have like a high tolerance for annoyance, and they're like, okay, you do you, kid, you'll grow out of it. Other people are like, oh my god, fuck this. This is terrible. I don't want to deal with this person. It's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, you're special and unique, but I also hate you. That's personally where I'm at. And considering how often we see the pros choose this map, I'm thinking that's where they're at a little bit too. They play this map in the GSL. Not that often, and the GSL has 7 maps. The GSL also has 1 map that isn't even in the regular ladder pool, which I think they're also hesitant to choose. This map is being cyberbullied, is exactly what's happening. But the Elite League is restricted to 5 maps, so there's also no vetoes. It's forced first. So you don't get the tricky person who's like, yes, I have a plan. I'm facing a best of 5 against Trap, and I know exactly what to do on this map because I will make sure he vetoes the other maps, and I'll choose this map. You don't get that here. So very often in these forced first map formats, especially if there's a reduced prize map pool, the players play on the most stock-sorted maps possible. But of course, there's always that oddball who does want to play in this map. But this is forced, this is my point. It's going to last 3 minutes. This is a forced first map for everyone in the round of 8. Double Adepts, being very annoying. Something you do still have to strongly consider responding to, despite the inhibitor zones. And did get a couple of drones worth of damage, forced a drone cancel, didn't do too much else. Impact going for a decent number of lings to help defend against that, but they just didn't have speed. 350 speed is a little bit late. And they certainly can't really do a good job of countering with no speed and inhibitor zone. Okay, all right. It was a little close, a little scary. So other than that, little blip. We do have Spore Crawlers not going up, double Queens, and the Natural as the Oracle comes in, specifically for that Oracle. Oracle tags 1 drone and gets the hell out of dodge, and Impact goes back into droning. I wonder how map makers feel when everyone vetoes the map they made. I'm sure every map maker feels a little bit different. I think you'll have some that are like, yeah, I expected it, but I still wanted to force the diversity. You have some people who are like, this is an outrage. I deserve to be on the council type things. And a bit of a baby rage. But couldn't tell you exactly. I don't even know who specifically made this map. Roachhorn coming down as Zest follows his Stargate up with, something more than an Archon drop. We have 4 gateways on top of 2. So with an Archon drop, alright, here comes Templar Archives. 4 gateways is the perfect amount for, you know, a very obvious reason. 4 High Templars, 2 Archons, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Also fit 4 High Templar and a War Prism, I guess, but that's not what you do it. Morphs 2 Archons. 2 Archons fit in a War Prism. You get more than 4 gateways, and yes, that could just be for production, especially if you see it kind of chronoed charge alongside of it. It means that you can do an attack with the Archon drop as well, and that's when, you know, you catch those Zerg players who are only defending with Zlings, yes, with Zerglings. If they're only defending with a fine number of roaches, thinking like, I got this, suddenly 6 charge lots come in with 2 Archons, even 2 Oracles, let's say that adds in, and suddenly it's a little scarier. But charge is not being chronoed. It started, but it's not being chronoed. If we do see any zealots, it would be just, I think, as a form of harassment. Just, you know, zealots over there, Archons over here. It looks like it was just for production. And I think eventually we'll see a Forge being added on too. As we get into that mid-game, Impact losing a queen here. Zest kind of has this this neat thing about him. If I could make a cool nickname, I would, but I'm not too great at that. Where a lot of games, a lot of his PvZs, he won't take any damage in the first 7 minutes. His Archon drop will do thousands of resources lost in damage. And it'll be like, oh, this is so Zest favored. And then he'll like die to a roach all in. It's just something I always notice about him. It's like one part kudos to his ability to micro and respond to Zerg early harassment, and another part kind of calling him out for some abrupt losses, some silly losses. But the Warp Prism does get low. It's not dead, and it is being joined up with not just 6 Zealot Warp-ins, but a couple extra. Still don't think this is brutal enough of a timing, right? There's so many roaches made. There's still a couple extra queens Impact made to help deal with the Warp Prism that Zest rightfully just turns around and goes back home. Not even sure it was really worth planning this attack. The attack I was talking about hits either with the Archons or very soon after. And that's when things are, you know, you're still at the kind of the drone or make army phase. Right now, Impact's kind of been, I mean, he's not done with drone necessarily, because 65's good, but he's got a 4th base, might go up to 70, but he's been building army for a while. Also finishing up all his upgrades, kind of delayed that roach speed. I guess they didn't think he needed it, and I guess if you have tabs on the Archon drop, I guess you don't need it. I haven't considered that before. Hydra range is first. If that Warp Prism ducks in a little bit too much, hopefully they can burst it down. But then into Hydra speed. Storm is going to finish up here. I brought up that Forge, and it took quite a while for it to be slapped down. I can't say for certain there was a delay on those 3rd gases to do this Zealot thing, but it kind of felt that way. Fortunately, I'm not so in tune with the Protoss build order. The point is, +1 is not going to be done for some time, whereas Impact already has his +1 and is looking for an attack. Not quite done with the Hydra speed, so that's a little bit awkwardly timed, but it's not that slow of an upgrade, so it should be done very, very soon. He is getting himself in position. He's going to be going through at least 1 inhibitor zone. 2, technically, right? But he doesn't have to go through this one. In fact, I would say that you don't want to go through that one. It is seriously dramatic how much it changes a battle, guys. This is not a tiny inhibitor zone this size. It is this size. But Zest, not necessarily abusing it, is maybe letting too much of the army through. But I guess in his situation, he knows there's not just an attack from the left side. He knows there's got to be one from the right, so he doesn't want to move too far to one side or the other. It's going to be a very tricky hold. He's actually splitting his army. That's not something he often does, but he certainly did it right there. He lost Archons and Immortals, some charges on the right side without any support from the Storm, and he is going to get absolutely conquered and destroyed. Oof. Oof, oof, oof. GG. Oh, that was brutal. Gosh, I should have told the Protoss to look away. I think the best scenario there was either jumping on top of the inhibitor zone units and killing a good chunk of them first, and then hoping your Nexus doesn't get sniped, or attacking the right side first while the left side tries to go through the inhibitor zone. Very tricky, though. Very tricky. That is such a huge concave when you're past the inhibitor zone. With the addition of a rather wide choke, not even really a choke, on the right side. So, some maps have an entrance to the right side that can be abused. It's like, yay big, and a couple storms deter that. And that actually has a pretty brutal attack. I don't want to make the Protoss cry here, but if any Zergs are watching, I would suggest stealing that build on that map and doing that. When you talked about Zest having a good early game and then just dying early. I know some things. Me smart. And yeah, that absolutely was one of those things that can happen. In the top left, as the pink Protoss, it is Zest. In the bottom right, as the red Zerg, it is Impact. Impact with a very strong attack. I have not seen the new maps too often, so I wasn't expecting such an abusive attack. Like, that was harsh. That was just like, I'm not sure exactly what Zest does. Not that I'd ever be able to tell him exactly what he could do better. I'm not a Protoss player. I'm not a good Protoss player. I'll never be as good as him. But generally, there's some things that even the lowest of skill levels can be like, you know what? You probably shouldn't have lost those High Templars. And that's if they're a streamer, they go like, oh wow, gee, thanks. That was so fucking obvious. Get the fuck out of here. But even besides that, there's like, well, I guess he should have had his army off to the left side. I guess he should have had a couple of storms with the second army. And while I think that still, the last thing I said is still absolutely true. He could have had storms. That was just such a wide concave, man. I don't know. I'll have to watch some other attacks. I guess it's also worth saying that Zest did have a plan that he wanted to execute that did not work out. Now, to the extent that it messed up a macro build, I can't truly say. Ask Roddy or someone for that exact knowledge. But you saw an attack. You saw the Zealots go across the map. I feel like those gases were delayed. The Forge was delayed. And they didn't do anything. So at the very least, the Zealots were planning on doing something and didn't do anything. The Archons also didn't do a ton of damage, which can contribute to a pretty strong mid-game attack by the Zerg. And that all comes together to make it look even more crazy than it was. But that was such a stomping. That's why I'm like, okay, that wasn't like 20 units left over. That was like 40 units left over. Well, that map's over and done with. Forced on that map. There's a couple different things about it that I think are still being left to figure out, both in the case of the person defending has to figure out how to defend against it, but also in the case of attacking. There's still more abusive strats to be found on these new maps, and more onto a second new map, Thunderbird. We have a Twilight Council first coming out here, and I wonder if Zest will make any point about clearing up these minerals. Obviously, with the Protoss, you are worried more about warping with a Warp Prism. But there is still something to be said about reducing any emergency reinforcements to the middle of the map, if you can. But clearly not on his mind. Not the first thing he's thinking about doing. He did do his little mineral blocking on the drones and eventually got a chunk of minerals. Twilight Council into Robo. What you gonna throw down here? Okay. So Dark Shrine. Immediately into a type of Archon drop, but with the option to go for the Dark Templar, and again, immediately into it. So no messing around with Stargates, which does push the attack off by X amount of time. I should really see exactly how much it pushes off by. I got Terran CC timings kind of down pretty well. An additional CC usually pushes off any attack or drop by like a minute, but I'm not sure about the Stargate and the Archon versus just Archon. Anyways, Zest, by the way, clearly going for the large but in charge wall off. If you can get the wall off up, more power to you. You are going to be walling off your third as well, but that is a very large wall off to do. Roach were on the way alongside a 350-ish layer, was that? So the Dark Templars do come in as you're morphing an Overseer if you morph an Overseer immediately. But that is the rub. You don't know if you need to morph an Overseer immediately. Alang does scout the Warp Prism. I think Impact, knowing Zest, knowing the options of the opener, was already a little suspicious of this attack. He also saw the gas timing at the natural, which can tell you Robo versus Archon drop, but ooh, even already on top of it was in Queens. Zest not finding the opportunity. So one thing that's perhaps lacking if these were High Templar would be an Oracle to save the Warp-ins, but Dark Templar, they're hidden boys, right? So they just warp in anyways. Now the Archons are what's gonna have trouble, and this was a very bold thing for Zest to do. He knew he was found out, but he gets away with it. No attempt to use the Dark Templars. Impact was immediately gonna go into Overseer, but also had Spore Crawlers finishing to make up for that gap of the layer finishing. Good save on the Adept right there. Impact hoping to get into the main base, but also hoping the Warp Prism is found lolling about. Nice distraction opportunity. But it's not, and the Archons will commence the harassment. So there we have a third Nexus hidden behind the wall. Sight on any of the minnow patches. If you send 2 drones out, you can go ahead and clear that up. Excuse me. Clear that up. Doesn't take too many run-bys. I say run-bys, but I meant in terms of drones picking up stuff. Is that a run-by? It's a drone-by. Anyways. And that third Nexus should be safe against ground, but hey, look at that. We have a Spire on the way, something that Zest is going to have trouble scouting. Has a couple sentries for hallucinations, but will you be sending one out, or do you think you have everything on lockdown? A little bit hard to tell. Very rarely do you get the full intel with the Warp Prism. You get partial intel. Sometimes the lack of Roach is a little suspicious. Sometimes you do see, like, hey, where are all your gases? But those would be the things kind of mark the potential. Otherwise, you're just paranoid of the Spire. The Forge is down, so we have the option of cannons alongside shield batteries, obviously, once he figures out it's a Spire. The Archons could be recalled if anything else sees it. Actually, a Depth see it? Where the hell did they come from? Oh, a second Warp Prism. I'm blind. They did not see the Spire, though. Nothing saying that Zest is suspicious of a Spire, but here's that tricky thing that can happen. If they push, if they think either you're going into a Spire or you're being greedy on drones, they just don't see a lot of army and they push, they warp in Stalkers as soon as they see that it's Mutas, and the Mutas aren't actually that great at holding an attack. So that just might be what happens here. 2 Warp Prisms still alive, meaning that even if this one were to be sniped, the other one would come forward and help out. Currently, the other one harassing with some Adepts. Archons save the Warp Prism. Definitely the best thing against Mutas. And oh, okay, the Mutas, not that they would help anyways, do lose their lives. Here comes the Warp into Stalkers. This doesn't time out like crispy, whatever. It doesn't time out perfectly with the +1, but it does time out with a charge. And I think Zest saw an opportunity to attack. He was absolutely right, even if he wasn't necessarily thinking it was going to be a Spire. 8 drones have gone down. Spire's going to go down in Impact. Went for a tech greedy build and has been punished for it. This call was picked by the players or ZG? The players. I can force it if I remember the hotkeys. To, I think, green and red, but... Just always chooses pink. Lots of Zealots on the main base are going to force a response. I mean, you can't ignore this, but with the low number of Roaches that Impact is showing us, it might look like he has a big supply, but he doesn't. Any taking away deal with these could be a disaster on the front lines. Seem to be an okay split. Mutas try and do their best here to harass, but they really can't do very much. I said it was a good split, but then what happened? The Roaches went to the third? Oh, they were chasing down the... Oh, that's what happened. They were chasing down the DTs as well, and, well, I'm not even sure it would have held if they would have been on the front line protecting those Ravagers, but that was kind of their duty. Duty. Was to protect those Ravagers, and it is close. You gotta wonder. Those Roaches are on the front lines from the get-go. Could it have been different? GG. Zest ties up the series. Thank you, Fear Dragon, for that raid. Hello, everyone from Fear Dragon's channel. We are watching Zest versus Impact, and then going into Stats versus Dream, and then finishing today with the last two subscriber replays that were just submitted. Which is the favorite of the new maps? I don't really have a favorite yet. I know what I hate, though. I do not like Turbo Cruise. I'm gonna go ahead and say Thunderbird's my favorite. I don't really like Acropolis that much yet, either. That's not a very strong feeling. Not as strong as hating Turbo Cruise. The top left is the pink Protoss. It is Zest. And at the bottom right, as the blue Zerg, it's Impact. Going for that Spire and being a bit punished for it. I'm not sure it was the Zest knowledge. Nothing else really screamed that he knew it was going to be hitting a person going Mutas who would be low on the straight-up army supply. No shield batteries were placed down. No stalkers were preemptively warped in and, you know, run across the map. But it worked out very favorably, and that is something that I think can just happen. Is it often a coincidence? Sure. Sure. But a lot of those attacks that Protoss can do seem to kind of time out around that Spire. It's not the first time nor the last time we'll see the whole, oh, I'll protect my warp with some warping stalkers and still have a pretty good attack. Sometimes it goes poorly for the Protoss. The Warp Prism gets sniped before they can recall it. Then they have to remake a Warp Prism, and they've lost 2 Archons. And then, you know, the Zerg player goes, oh shit, you're going to attack me, and builds more Roaches and Ravagers, and just lets the Mutas do harassment. And sometimes it goes like it did, where they don't actually do too much, and the ground army is just a little too effective of the Protoss against the numbers of Roaches you can afford when you're going for what is a pretty quick Spire. I mean, the quickest Spires you really expect in Legacy of the Void nowadays are going to be off 3 bases with not even 3 base saturation, is it? 55 drones? Yeah, around there. No one does 2 base Spire anymore. Not really. Zest opened up with the Archon drop. DTs didn't do very much. It ultimately ended in his favor with the follow-up attack. Now going to open up with that Stargate once again. Also trying to deny this 3rd base. As annoying as possible. Protoss motto. Thunderbird makes me think of the email program. Me too. It's actually the program that I use. I'm thinking they were going for the car. Or maybe they just were going for the idea of a Thunderbird, like a Pokemon. Because Pokemon. Don't know. But I doubt it was for the email program. They do both share the blue color. Just throwing it out there. Look forward to next season's new maps, Outlook, and Gmail. If it wasn't for, I think, Google being like, okay, that's not cool, and getting angry about their name being used. Thunderbird's a Mozilla product, right? And they're open source and cooler. I would not mind it. You know, get the chrome colors in there. Phoenix comes out to take care of the Overlord. There is Impact Scout of the game. He is going to at least see the gas timings of the natural before it dies. Stargate's very rarely going to 2 base all-ins, so I don't think it's a surprise. But do what you can before the Overlord dies. And then into at least 2 Oracles here with the Chrono Boost. Lair has been started. Impact not yet thrown down a Roach Warren. Does not have to fear an attack because of what I just said. So that's the good news. What you fear, I guess, quote unquote, is like a relatively well-timed 3rd base Nexus for the Protoss and a macro game. Because you're not really fearing taking damage from an Oracle, at least not usually. But those Queens were out of position, expecting them to go straight to the 3rd or something like that. So we had 4 Queens all together. 1 drawn from the natural and regretting its decision to do so. That really should not have been the case. I think Impact was trying to catch it preemptively and be a cool kid, and he did something much worse. So no queen in the main to even deter that, no queen in the natural to even deter that, and then no 2 queens anywhere to really send the Oracle packing. So that was just a straight up mistake, one not usually so egregious in professional play, but all right. We do have a more concentrated 2-base follow-up here. Lots of gateways. I think he only went into a robo, no Twilight Council, so easy things to determine if someone's going to be aggressive or not, right? Number of gateways, but also that lack of tech, lack of gas. He's going to have all gases, it looks like. Is he pulling out of any? Yeah. He's not, either. So a lot of sentries can be warped in, but there's no plan on advancing to that High Templar attack. So I said Stargate, follow-up 2-base attack is pretty rare, and it is. And this is going to be a later attack than those brutal robo openers and some other PVZs, but it is going to be a 2-base attack, and it's going to be hitting relatively soon. The Warp Prism's already on the front lines after all, so just about getting these units away from the natural and getting all those warp ins. There's all those sentries. Now, sentries do not do that well against mutas, unless you're talking about really funny numbers. 8 sentries versus 2 mutas, well, clearly sentries would win that. But only just now has Zest scouted that spire. I think that was the first sighting of it. So the sentries had to be warped in first. It's still a crucial component to this attack. You gotta start warping in stalkers, and you have to have some order defense because the mutas could already be on the way while you're still making your way through the map. And even if they're not here to pop an immortal shield, try and kill the warp prism, they could be killing probes, stopping your reinforcement train, which is still important. But Zest does have an army supply lead. I really think Impact was thinking more about the 3rd base. He was once again thinking he would have the time to get to a spire, but now he had to make that really tough choice, which is just not to use a spire at all. He let it finish, so if he holds on to this, maybe he can add a few mutas in and help out, but he's got to go back into building roaches and ravagers and lings, and he does have ravagers. He's got a good number of queens trying to snipe down an oracle or the warp prism. It is so far back there. Zest very aware that could happen. It will mean he doesn't have a micro on the front lines for the immortals, but he has so many force fields, already cutting some of that army in half. That's about half of his force fields used. Here comes the warp prism now. Good God, is it low? But 2 queens have died, 3 queens behind the force fields can't think about reaching that. And oh my God, that stasis trap actually did something. It caught all of the queens, a good handful of lings, and Impact really has not dug into the army count quite yet, which is continuing to be reinforced. Finally grabs a couple of sentries, but all of his army is dying here. Impact, with the choice to go Spire in the last 2 games, has just not worked out for him whatsoever. GG. Game time.